Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the ISM New Jersey webinar program. We hope you will enjoy today's program, which is going to be on purchasing hacks. Please be sure to utilize the Q&A tab for any questions you might have for our speaker. Now, to introduce our speaker for today is Ryan Hatcher. He is the director at Cost and Capital. He has worked in the management consulting industry for over 15 years and has had the opportunity to lead projects in the automotive, transportation, logistics, industrial, restaurant, hospitality, telecommunications, disaster recovery, and chemical industries. His project work has included sourcing strategy and negotiations, organizational design, process improvement, due diligence, cash management, and operational reviews. He has executed project work in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Sweden, India, and Nigeria. That's quite a few. Ryan speaks English and Spanish and holds a BSE in Industrial and Operations Engineering from the University of Michigan. It is my pleasure to introduce Ryan.
Well, thanks, Kathy, and hello, everybody. It's good to be with you today. And what we, in a little bit, just about, got the introduction about me, just want to tell you a little bit about Cost and Capital and how we develop this training. What we do, like Kathy mentioned, we do a lot of sourcing work, other work with our clients. And as a result of our work on different purchasing projects, we were asked by our clients to develop training to basically help transfer our skills. Really about what we do as a company is probably 90% project work and maybe 10% training. So that's how this came about. And this section itself, purchasing hacks, not what our sales guys call us behind our backs, but hacks to find ways to find data and information that might be hard to do. We really developed as a direct result of what we've learned over the years working on different projects and categories that are new to us. So we can get into it. And so what we're really going to cover today is different techniques, tips, and tricks to uncover information really online. And this is really helpful when you might have a situation where you need to find pricing or how RFQs are structured or ways to figure out if your supplier is being honest when you don't have access to large databases that already have all the information in them. Like one case might be different steel indexes. A lot of you, if you work with raw materials, you can sign up for those kind of services and get those indices, get that pricing very easily. But if you're looking for benchmarks, maybe on contingent labor, short of spending thousands and thousands of dollars for benchmark reports, this is a way to go about finding similar information. And a lot of what we leverage here is publicly available information based on Bureau of Labor Statistics, the General Services Administration, a lot of different government RFPs and RFQs, because when we think about it, a lot of what we buy as buyers, the government's also buying. So this is ways to dig into that kind of information. And really, after this course, you'll have some concrete ways to go out and find information that maybe has been challenging to find in the past. So we'll cover some different search techniques, look into kind of governmental data sources, and then also touch on real quick, a little bonus is our payment term discount calculator. So when we talk about purchasing hacks and things that the government might buy or that others buy in large quantities, those are the kind of commodities that this really works well with. So it's everything from food and beverage. If you think of schools and prisons and hospitals, the government does buy a lot of food, especially commodity foods. So if you work in the restaurant industry, hotel industry, this can be really helpful. Fleet, anything related to cars, how they're billing that out. There's lots of RFPs around that. Different chemicals, travel, you can get obviously hotel rates, room rates, how discounts are structured, different car rental rates. When it comes to IT, kind of another indirect category that works really well with these approaches, you can find hardware pricing, software pricing, especially getting into project implementation, rates for software engineers, rates for project managers, all those kinds of things. There's a lot of details around that. And that kind of connects into the services, which is another area. And one even example is looking at just consultants. There's lots of consultants that work for the government and their rates are out there. So those are things that you can work to push back even on people like us sometimes if our companies have agreements with the government. There's also lots of other types of labor, contingent labor, basic temp labor, light industrial, up to office, accountants, engineers, all those types of positions. You'll usually be able to find really good, true benchmarks. And oftentimes the government's not, or the local entities aren't bringing in mass quantities of those. So it is a pretty good comparison. This also works good with MRO. So anything really related to maintenance or anything that's in a facility, gloves, masks, nuts, bolts, fasteners, really all kinds of things we found a lot of good benchmarks on. Freight, you can dig into sometimes freight rates, but it can also be more valuable for looking at accessorials and what kind of surcharges, how they might be structuring fuel surcharges. You can then see how that compares to your agreements, since those are areas where freight companies can sometimes hide some costs and gain some extra margin. And then another relevant one in today's world is PPE. So again, gloves, masks, gowns, all those things that the government's buying in large quantities. You can see how their pricing is structured, how they're getting discounts to distributor pricing. So those are just some of the categories, and hopefully, as you can see, it's a lot of different categories. A lot of them are on the indirect side. There's some things that also apply in direct sourcing. But where would this information come from? It comes from, like I said a little bit before, schools, states, counties, cities, prisons, the military, and then the general government are all essentially sourcing the things that were on the previous page. So it's not that you can only, if you can't find it at a local level, it's not going to be at the federal level, and vice versa. Another thing that you can do, it's a heavier lift, but if you know that you have a supplier that works with the government in a significant way, you can file a Freedom of Information request to get basically their pricing information in some cases. But it's important to remember that this would take a lot more time to go through that entire process. So that would be something to be used pretty sparingly and strategically if need be. And when you start to look for results, and we're going to get into different approaches for how to do that, these are kind of snapshots of how those documents might look. And it might show exact pricing. You might just be getting terms and conditions. It might be a general kind of discount to list if it's a distributor. But oftentimes you will be able to get down to hourly rates, cost per part, cost per service. And you'll be able to see that in real kind of live either bid responses from the companies or bid summaries that the government does to compare different suppliers against each other. And having these kind of documents in a negotiation or even on a call or meeting with the supplier, we found is very powerful to say, why are you giving the local school board a better rate on accountants than us? Those can be hard things for the suppliers to defend. So there's different ways to go about finding this information, and it's kind of a combination of how do we look for something and where do we look for it. So in the coming pages, we'll show some tricks specifically to Google, but there are government sites. We'll get into a couple of those. A lot of you are members of trades groups that might have benchmarking data on them. There's always good financial information if your supplier is public. You can find a lot of information just from reading their investor reports or earnings call transcripts, just to get an idea of their overall corporate performance. They won't, of course, have individual price benchmarking down at that level, but they will talk about general trends and where they're being pressured and where they're maybe not being pressured any longer. If your supplier is has a big presence in a small area, like a big facility in a small town, you'll find a lot of information about tax breaks they're getting, labor rates they're paying, and local media, local news articles. Also, you can find information in any sort of bankruptcy or court filings. Also have to often get pretty detailed into financial details. And one other one that we need to be careful on, but not everybody always is things as basic as LinkedIn and social media. If you see one of your suppliers' buyers bragging about how much that they save every year in their LinkedIn description, you might want to question, is any of that savings being shared with you as a customer? So those are kind of the places where we can look for information. Now, how do we do it? There's lots of different search techniques that we'll get into in the coming slides. And those, basically combining these different approaches is what leads to finding usually some pretty good benchmark information. So the more direct and focused we can be in our searches, obviously the better, and we're going to save time if we really know what we're looking for and if we search in that manner. So this is just an example that I looked at a couple days ago. Just keying in diesel prices to Google, you get 2.6 billion results. Obviously not going to be very helpful. If you're looking at better of pricing reports, because you might have seen terminology on one of your agreements with the supplier, that gets to 240 million. You try to add an adder of file type, trims it down more, and then using kind of the quotes and truncating gets to 2 results. And this was an example that we actually searched for and used while we were on a project for a trucking company. We were trying to figure out, Pilot is one of the big truck stop operators, and we were just trying to see if anything was out there, and found one of their pricing agreements that they had with another trucking company. When we found this, we did contact them and told them this should be taken down, but it's an example of what you can find out there when you're searching and trying to look in a focused manner. So to help focus your search, these are operators that you can use within Google. And I know some people already know of all these. For some of you, these operators might be new, but there's a few that are really the most important. So one of those being file type. So often, if we're thinking of RFQs, RFQ summaries, bid tabulations from the government, they're usually stored in some county, city, state server or online website as a PDF or an Excel file. So in this case, if we want to find temp labor markups, you kind of just say temp labor markup, and then if you put file type PDF with no space between file type and PDF, your search results will all be PDF files. And then you can kind of go from there and start looking through them. Another really important one is using quotes. That will make sure that your results, or that those words, bid tabulation in this case, those 2 words have to be together and listed in that same order in order for the results to come back. So when you start to combine these different operators, and you can use them kind of in a string, that's how you're going to get down to more refined results. There's an in-text operator that will help search specific text inside a document. So your results will only have documents that have that text within them. Site will search within a specific website for a certain term. So the example here, we have Ecolab site gsa.gov. Again, no space between the operator and the website. And that will return only pages on the gsa.gov website that have the word Ecolab on them. Similar to that approach is in URL, and that's only going to return URLs or websites that have a specific word in them. So in this case, AA.com is American Airlines. So any kind of URLs on their website that might be aa.com/Florida/discounts, that kind of website would pop up. But aa.com/reservation wouldn't, because that discount isn't in the website itself, in the website phrasing. The minus sign is also good for narrowing down your searches. That basically will say if a word, the word that you have after your minus sign will be excluded from all your results. So you might have a supplier that shares a name with a sports team, or shares a name with a famous person. You can kind of use this minus to get rid of all that Google noise and kind of get down and focus just on your supplier or your category that you're searching for. The wild card, anybody who uses any ERP would already know about this one. You do the same thing with part numbers. You just put a little asterisk in there and it's going to act as a placeholder for one or several digits. And then in title kind of works the same as in text. It's just looking though just for the title of kind of different websites or articles. And then and or will either return, if you put and, you're going to require both those values to exist. If you do or, it can be either, in this case, either temporary labor or contingent labor will return your results. And then just a couple of dots will allow you to search within a range of numbers. So if you're looking for only certain labor rates, that's an approach that you can take. I would say out of all these, you should be able to accomplish 90% of what you want to do with file type, phrase, and maybe the exclude minus sign. Those I think are probably the most valuable out of these. There's another important tool within Google that helps you search by time. So of course you don't want results usually going 10 or 15 years back. And all you have to do here is select where it says anytime. You can do a little drop down in that and see results in past day, past month, past year, set the custom range to a couple different years. So that all you have to do is click on tools and then anytime will pop up. And then you can kind of dig in deeper with, again, tools in advanced search. And that will take you then to this window where you can key in some of the different operators that we saw in the previous couple slides. You can kind of key those into pre-built fields, set your timeline, set your languages. I think even set regions of results. Again, the goal is to narrow down quickly so you're not wasting your time. So this approach is really good for things that we think or have a feeling that the government is spending a lot of money on, because that's where you're going to get more relevant results. And when we're looking at commodities, of course, we want to be careful about timelines. Obviously not look at what steel price was doing in 2009 or even maybe last year, since things have changed so much. You want to keep that, and you definitely use those timeline and search operators in Google to filter that out, and usually focus on the last couple years. Some keyword results that work really well for finding government results is bid tabulation, RFP results, bid results, RFQ results, award summary. Usually putting those in quotes, and then your commodity, ideally your part number, your manufacturer, distributor name. The more detail you can have, that's how you're going to get better results back. But bid tabulation, award summary are good ones to start out with. Punctuation, Google's generally not going to care about in a search operator. And I saw a question come through about capitalization. It's not going to care about whether things are capitalized or not using the search operators. One thing it will care about though is having a space after that colon. You don't want a space there because it usually won't work. Sometimes Google does updates so that things like this can change over time, but to be safe, make sure you just don't have a space there. And I would say just in general, from our experience, if we're working in trying to dig into the category where we can't get clarity from a supplier, or we don't have access to databases or industry studies, we usually try to spend, I would say, 10 minutes maybe or so on a specific category or topic, because generally, and once you get practice at it, you'll get quicker at it and kind of get a feeling for the results. But generally, if you're kind of seeing nothing come back, if you're doing bid tabulation, part X or commodity X, category X, file type PDF, and just nothing's really coming up, you're gonna know within the first 10 minutes or so if this is going to be fruitful or not. It's definitely obviously not a way to spend the whole day. So what the results can look like, and I think you can find this right now if you just Google this, but in this case, we're using the quotes as one of the operators, and then the file type. So in this case, we were trying to find benchmarks for Kelly Services on their contingent labor rates. So we just did Kelly Services, bid tabulation, markup, file type PDF. 9 results came back. One of those was Huntsville Schools, and you can see their accounting clerk markup, their lead account, their clerical assistants, school aides, all 30% markup. And in this case, our client was paying, I believe it was over a 50% markup for kind of basic admin and clerk positions. So again, it does matter what your volume is versus the government, but by and large, if you're comparing yourself just to a school district, that can create a pretty powerful negotiation point to bring up in a conversation. Of course, you're not always going to get instant savings, but it can put your supplier on the defensive. And then this is an example where we're using a specific, I guess, part name in a way, but it's mini fold napkins for one of our hospitality clients. Bid tabulation, again, file type PDF. You'll see again, these quotes and the file type are used in probably the best results. And in this case, we found what basically, again, you get back to what you're paying per napkin, per case, per pack size. And another good one here, we also see their payment terms. The government's offered a 1% discount if they pay net 10 instead of in 30 days. So it's not always just pricing that we can find. We can also find contract terms and conditions. And if I just jump back real quick, you can also see how RFQs are structured, how pricing is looked at. If a supplier is giving cost breakdown to the government, but not you, those are always good things to talk about. Or even if you're working in a category that you've never sourced before and you want to kind of figure out what should I be asking, this can be an approach just to find other RFQs and see others who've done the work that you're about to do. So what we normally do in our in-person classes, this is about an hour-long session in our normal 2-day training. We have people kind of break up, spend 5 or 10 minutes on the laptop and just real quick see what they can find. And usually we've found that 1 or 2 people will start shouting in the meeting itself and get on the phone with their supplier maybe later that afternoon because they might have found something real quick. But we'll skip that for today. But just think of categories and common things. Again, the theme is what I buy in the military? Is it in a school? Is it in a general office building? Is it in a port or a transportation hub that the government might be running? Those are all areas where there's going to be RFQs, there's going to be benchmarking, and your suppliers, if they're large national companies, sometimes even local ones, they probably have a piece of that business. So that's kind of the freewheeling way to find information. These next couple ones are more structured, but some of the search techniques still apply. So we'll start out just with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the website is just bls.gov. And what this is really good for, and what we're going to focus on in today's session, is looking up wage information. It can also be used for benefits, for just number of people working in a certain position in an area, lots of other statistics. But basically what the government does is they go out And they ask both employers and workers, okay, you're a truck driver, how much do you get paid? What's your take home? And they kind of match up those responses in different cities and compile that for free for us. Part of what we pay as taxpayers is this information. So in this example, we had a supplier tell us, you're getting the best price for me. Nobody comes close to your pricing. I actually lose money on every move because your pricing is so good. I pay my drivers $45 an hour. It costs us a lot, but we deliver great service for you. So that might feel a little high to you. So this is one way to check how does that compare to the average in the area. So you just go to bls.gov, and we're going to share, I don't know if we mentioned in the beginning, but Kathy can share this PDF with everybody. So just and these are the step-by-step instructions basically on the BLS website of how to get to this kind of information. So you first click on subjects, then you'll see a wages by area and occupation. And then there's kind of an in-between window with little YouTube videos describing BLS. Just scroll down and you click wages by area and occupation again. And these are things that change from time to time on the website, but the structure of the data doesn't change. So that's really the important thing. And then what you always want to start out on is the lowest, most local level. If your supplier is located in Trenton, New Jersey, you want to start searching wages in Trenton, New Jersey. It doesn't really matter what people in Louisiana are making. It's not relevant because each labor market's different. So to get there, you click on this wages by metropolitan area, and that's going to give you 395 cities to choose from. So in this case, we're looking for Trenton. So we'll click on that. And then you're going to have hundreds of jobs that people do in the Trenton area. And in our case, we're looking for truck drivers. So we want to search the page for that. That brings us down to this area where we have sales guys, we have heavy and tractor trailer, which is what we think applies to us. We have light truck drivers, bus drivers, and then just passenger vehicle drivers. So you want to kind of look at the results and then click on the job title that you think applies best to what you're looking for. And that will bring you to a page that looks like this. You can see tractor trailer combination, sometimes needs unload goods. Okay, this matches. This is what we asked our client to do for us, or our supplier to do for us. So you then just hit back to your page, and these bars over here, or these columns over on the right, is median, mean. There's headers at the very top, but we scroll down so we just can't see them. But this one that's circled in red is the median wage. So, and again, this is just wage. This isn't a fully loaded rate. So our supplier is telling us he pays his guys $45 an hour. We're seeing the average wage, people's take home, is $24.85 an hour in the area. Now, are we asking for very specialized handling, hazmat, anything like that, that might cause us to be almost double the average wage? In our case, we weren't. So that was something that we used to come back and negotiate further with the supplier. So again, just some things to be careful about this. Just make sure that your job description does match. The wages are just means and medians. So like I said before, if you're asking something of your supplier that's driving extra cost, extra permits, extra training, extra handling of materials, or extra expertise, that is probably going to cause a legitimate premium, and it's going to differ from these rates. This is, again, just standard pay. So if they're getting overtime, that's not blended in here. Social costs, Social Security, Medicare, all those fees, unemployment taxes are not included in these numbers. So if you want to get to a fully loaded rate, you're going to have to multiply that. We find in our clients anywhere from 1.35 to 1.6 is what different companies use. You can kind of check with your own HR or accounting department to see what is normal for your industry. The more specialized and benefit heavy the position, the higher that multiplier is going to be in general. And also just keep in mind the $45 an hour we were talking about with our supplier and the 23 or 24.85, neither one of those included any overhead profit. So we were comparing apples to apples. We're talking about just talking about what the take home, what the actual wage is. The BLS website does have other sections in it to talk about average benefit costs, all that. We're not getting into that today, but you can kind of click through the site and see those. It's structured in a similar way. Now, if you say you did click down to Trenton and the position you were looking for wasn't there, you didn't have a good feel for any of that, you can kind of go a level up and look at the state level. So again, you just go to wages by occupation, and then instead of clicking by metro area, you click by state and kind of follow the same approach. Click New Jersey, and then the screens would look the same. It's just a state average instead of a city metro area average. And I don't think we've come across any job title that wasn't available at the state level, but worst case, you can go up and get the national averages too. And now the next area that we'll look at is the GSA for specific contract lookups. And I think this tool we found for a lot of our clients has been really exciting if they didn't already know it existed. So basically, you can think of the GSA as the government's purchasing department at the federal level. There's also, obviously, each state has their own sort of version of the GSA, but the GSA has a really easy to use contract database that we found that other services are actually charging people for access to this kind of data, even though you can get it for free through the GSA website. And again, this is if you think of anything that you're buying that the federal government might be buying, if they're buying it, the agreement to some extent will be on this website. Obviously, keep in mind that your quantities might differ, but a lot of times if you're working for a larger company, your quantities might be even in the same ballpark or more that the government's buying. And like I mentioned before, other good things in addition to just pricing and benchmarking that kind of information, you can also get contract terms, warranty terms, delivery terms, payment terms, lots of different basically commercial terms are all lined out in these agreements. And again, this tends to lend itself better to indirect procurement categories. It can work on the direct side, but it's more of a gold mine on the indirect side. So again, just like BLS.gov, this website's GSA.gov. So just go there, scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll see a little in the bottom right corner, tools, and then e-library, and that's where you want to go. So then you get a screen like this, and you have categories. You can just search keywords, supplier names, part numbers. It's usually a little bit better if you start from the category side. In this example, we're going to look for MRO items. So we see underneath the search box, we see categories, and we see one of those categories is facilities. So that is usually linked to MRO. So we're going to give that a shot and click on that. In these categories, just like on the BLS site, the government does update, expand, contract categories. They're not deleting data. So if your category used to be there, it might have just been folded into another category. It's not gone forever. When we click in there, we can see kind of different types of agreements. And this can take some time to get used to, but you really want to just play around with the site a little bit. And once you use it once or twice, you'll get the hang of it. But in this case, we found a category that had MRO distributor agreements. And that's what we want in this case. So you just click the red category code. And that takes you to all the agreements that the federal government has with different companies. In this case, we are intrigued by 3M. We know it's a major supplier to us. We want to see what those terms and conditions look like for the government versus us, because we're pretty confident we have high volumes with them. So you'll see if a actual contract document does exist, you'll see that in this column that has a red arrow pointing to it, and clicking on that will take you to a Word document or a PDF file. If you look down a little bit, the second to bottom row, that one doesn't have an agreement. You'll see that from time to time. They just hasn't been uploaded, or it might have expired, so it's been taken off the website. And you'll also notice in the contract number column, that has the federal government contract number. So if you think back to when we were Googling for things, you could search that term also in general to see what else is out there related to that contract number. So clicking on that agreement brings us to this 18-page contract that Ecolab has with the government. And in this case, it had everything from commercial terms to lots and lots and lots of prices for individual part numbers. And you have it's really hard and tiny to see, but you kind of have the supplier part number, the description, the quantity, pack size, and then the price. So this lends itself very well for apples to apples benchmarking. Again, keeping in mind quantities. So this, I would say, is a very powerful tool. It's a very good thing to use, to get used to test out. And you might be surprised what you can find from a benchmarking perspective. And again, we do our race in our person-to-person classes. Another kind of quick thing with the GSA is they have the per diem rates. So if you're working a lot with suppliers that have to travel a lot and might be setting their own per diems and you want to push back on that, you can just find out what the general government per diems are by area. So in here, we just look at GSA again, travel, per diem rates. And then you can either put city, state, or zip code to search. In this case, we're going to look at Miami, Florida to see what hotels are looking like, since it's starting to get a little cold out. And what the government sets for its federal employees as a per diem in Miami is 192 for the hotel and then 66 for food. So again, it might not always apply to your suppliers, but it does help you get a benchmark if you might be building up a cost model in travel, or hotel stays are a major component of that work. Now, another kind of the bonus item that we have here is our payment term discount calculator. And this is another thing that we've developed basically at a request of some of our clients. We've noticed a lot of times in negotiations, a supplier might offer 1% 10 net 30, like we saw the government had. They might say 0.5% 20 net 60. And it's a question of how do we know when to take that, when is that good or bad, aside from just using our gut. So what this tool helps you do is figure out how much that's actually impacting margins using a cost of capital perspective. So we have the tool both on our website, and we have an app for Google and Android that's free to download that you can take a look at. But basically you key in the discount that's been offered, your company's cost of capital. You can get that from your accounting or treasury department. Usually it's between 7 and 10% or so, sometimes less. The change of days. So if they want to go from net 30 to net 10, that would be a 20-day change. The amount of money involved, usually your annual spend with that supplier, and that will then tell you the margin impact. So if you're getting that 2% offer in this case, you're going to wind up okay. And what we have here is just a quick example of how that works. So we have an annual spend of $575,000. Our current payment terms are net 60. The supplier is proposing net 20 to us. We got from accounting that our cost of capital is 8%. We then want to know, okay, if I'm going to pay you 40 days faster, how much of a discount should you give me to get that money quicker? So in this case, we key in, first we key into 8%, change of days is 40 because we're going from 60 to 20, key in our invoice amount. And then what we do here is test these numbers a little bit, key in 1, 2, 3, and you want to obviously at least break even. In this case, I would want more than 1% for my supplier. I'd probably want 1.5 or 2 for them to get paid earlier, because if I pay at 1%, my 1% discount's really only getting me $730 once the cost of capital is taken into account. So this is really just a quick tool that can be used, that we found has been good for a lot of our clients. And you can either go to our site or just search payment term calculator using our Google tricks, and we'll be one of the top couple results. So that's what we had. I ended a little bit early, but I guess that leaves us some time for questions if people have any thoughts or things that might work for their commodities, or if you've tried these in the past, feel free to comment. And Kathy, I don't know if there's been any questions during the call itself.
No, people just wanted to know if they were going to be getting a copy of the slides, which, yes, we will be giving a copy of the slides to all of our attendees today. If anybody does have a question, please use the Q&A. Now's the time to ask that question, as Ryan is available to answer it. And Ryan, do you have any other closing thoughts on,
One thing, not necessarily closing cost or closing thought, but one thing that I'll include in my with the PDF will be my contact information. So if you're trying and struggling with this, and if you have questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help with that.
Okay, great. I got a nice thank you from Gladys for providing this excellent presentation. This is from Alan. Thanks, Ryan. How effectively do the government and schools purchase? Example, I've heard about the $500 hammer.
You'd be surprised. We've seen generally it's pretty competitive. Again, sometimes some of these results, it's going to be a small school district in Alabama. That was that Kelly Services example that I showed earlier on. But I guess in that case, that small school district in Alabama was getting a 30% markup when our client was paying 45 or 50. So I would say that we've seen, obviously you see rates higher, but we've seen a lot of rates in contract terms that are lower. I would say more than half of what we look at. The government's doing a pretty good job.
Thank you. Gladys, did you have another question? Because I saw that you raised your hand. A question from David. Hi, Ryan. Have you ever filed a Freedom of Information request to gain access to documents not online? If so, what is the turnaround time?
The turnaround, you're looking more at months of turnaround time. That's why you'd only want to do it if you really can't get that information in other ways. So I think we tried to do it once at the last company I worked at, and by the time we got the information back, we were no longer working for that client. So we forwarded it on, but it's definitely more of a long-term approach.
Okay, and any resources you would suggest for outside of the United States?
These, I can send a couple. There are, we use a lot of the sites, government sites in Mexico. Canada has amazing statistical sites. There's also Eurostat for the EU that has all sorts of wage information. But it's also important to remember these search operators and things when it comes to Google, that's not unique just the US. Those can work outside the US as well.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Please use the Q&A tab, or the chat bar is fine as well. I do appreciate, Ryan, for this very informative because there's so much information in this presentation today. And as I said, we will be sharing all the slides with all of our attendees today. And just a little reminder, we'll be sending everybody out a short survey. And it's going to have your CEU in there as well. So make sure you don't delete it, because if you're looking for the CEU, that will have your CEU that you can just click on it and retrieve and keep for your certification. And also, we'd like to get some ideas for future programs for next year. We're working on our schedule now. Ryan, did you have any other comments you want to conclude with before we end today?
No, I would say just try giving this a shot and see what you can find. Try searching specific part numbers or supplier names. Just give it a go. It's going to be a little tricky in the beginning, but it's something that once you get used to it, you'll be able to do it really quickly. And like I said earlier, it's helpful not just for benchmarking what you're buying today, but also looking into how new categories that you might be working on are sourced. And again, a lot of this we focused on how the government's buying things, but you'll also find these documents and these search operators will often give you results like in the pilot travel case that I mentioned from private companies too from time to time.
I appreciate that.
Give it a go.
Yeah, the information was wonderful. It even gave me some ideas, as well as doing some searches myself to help us as well. And I would like to, again, thank you for, presenting today, and especially on this particular topic. And I'm just going to let everybody know that our next webinar is going to be next week, October 28th. It'll be a different topic. It's going to be tool up key strategies supply chain managers need to know for mitigating the impact of COVID-19 on the global trade and managing the recovery process. So that's going to be a totally different topic. If you are not registered, please make sure to go to our website and register for that particular program. And of course, all of our webinars are free for all of our ISM members. And again, thank you, Ryan, for sharing all this information. And if anybody has any questions, say that you do download the app and you have a question, just let me know and I will give you Ryan's contact information and he will give you guidance for using the app. A lot of good comments coming in saying thank you so much, very valuable information, and we do appreciate all those kind words. Thank you very much. Let me see if looks like there's a question here. Oh, please thank Ryan for all of his helpful information. Thank you again. I wish everybody a great afternoon, and this program actually will be available on our YouTube channel. So you can check it out, or you can share it with your colleagues if they were unable to join us today. So have a great afternoon. And again, thank you, Ryan and Costing Capital, for being one of our featured speakers for this month. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, take care, everybody.